Hello there, I'm Isabel, and today I'm making a posable Coraline doll. Let's get started, shall we? I'll start by bunching up foil into a sort of rounded triangle shape. Then I'll cover that with Sculpey ultralight to help make the head as light as possible, so the weight of it doesn't make her tip over. I baked the clay, and once it cooled down, I covered it in a second layer of clay. The clay I'm using is a half and half mixture of Super Sculpey Original and Firm, since I find the original a bit too soft and the firm one a bit too hard. So mixing both makes it just right for me. I drew lines in the clay to mark the placement of the eyes, nose, and mouth. Using those lines as guide, I'll shape the eye sockets. And add more clay to build up the jaw. Then carve out the eyes with a silicone tool, trying to get them as symmetric as I can. I'll add clay for the nose. Coraline's nose is slightly crooked towards the right, so I made sure to push it a bit to the side. Then I'll gently blend the clay with my tool. If you're looking for tools to work with polymer clay, I recommend getting a set of metal ones. I especially love this little spoon-shaped one from a set I bought on Amazon. The nose looks pretty good. Next, I'll carve out her mouth. I'll slowly push the clay around until I get a nice little smirk shape. Then I added a tiny coal of clay to add more dimension to her top lip and blend that in. I added clay to make her eyelids. It looks a bit weird right now, but I'm using this image as a reference, so once everything is painted, she won't look so weird. Things always look a little cursed until the end, so you just gotta trust the process and not get discouraged. Next, I'll add tiny coals of clay to make her eyebrows, and position them to give her a sassy expression. Looking back, I wish I had painted them on instead, cause I made them a bit too thick. Then I'll add both of her ears and carve in more details with a ball tool. And that's it for the head, so I'm gonna go ahead and bake it. Next, I'll make the body armature. It's made out of 3 pieces of wire that I taped together. I'll check that the length looks right with the sides of the head. Looks pretty good to me. So I'll start adding clay around the wires to make the torso and the neck. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, since it will all be covered by the clothes later on. It's just to help make the doll a bit sturdier. I'll also add clay to the hips to strengthen them. Then I'll go ahead and bake that. And while I still have my clay out, I'll sculpt the hands. The easiest way I've found to sculpt hands is by making each finger individually first. So I'll roll a tiny coal of clay between my fingers, then add 2 little bend lines, flatten the top, then add a tiny little ball of clay to make the nail, and flatten that a bit. And that's 1 finger done. I'll make and bake the other 9s off camera. I only got 5 here now because I already went ahead and sculpted her right hand. So let's make the left one. I'll shape a blob of clay into a palm, then insert each finger one by one, gently blending the clay around before I add another one. Then repeat the process until all the fingers are in place. Like, seriously? How easy was that? I'll add more clay to make the wrists and forearm, and I'll drill a hole in the forearm so I can secure them to the wire armature later on and set them aside to bake. Next, I'll sculpt her rubber boots. I'll start by rolling the clay into a cylinder, then bend and pinch it into a boot shape. Then I'll carve the details with a needle tool. Add a rim at the top. Cut off the excess. And gently blend the seam. I'll also add the little strap on the side of the boot. Fun fact, the French word for boot is butt, not to be confused with the English word butt. Boot, butt, boot, boot, butt, butt. Silly fun facts. Anyways, off camera, I did the second boot and off to the oven they go. Beep boop, beep boop, beep boop. Once they had cooled down, I sculpted the soles. And off to the oven they go once again. Beep boop, beep boop. While that bakes, I'll glue sponges on the armature to bulk up the body. I cut a slit in the sponge so I can glue it around the wire. This ensures that I can still bend the metal and pose her body. I could have skipped the arms. In the end, it really didn't make a difference since her raincoat is so big. I also didn't leave enough exposed wire to screw the arms on, so I had to go back and remove a bit of the sponge afterwards. I'll trim the sponges to refine the shape. I won't do the legs since she has very skinny spaghetti legs and the wire will do just fine. So with that done, let's move on to painting. I'll start with the arms. Then I painted her nails blue. I'm only realizing this as I'm editing, but her nails should be light blue, not navy blue, so I'll have to correct that. I did several coats of yellow on the boots and painted the soles black. I'll paint the head next. I forgot to film this, but I sculpted the shape of her hair to reduce the amount of hair I'll need to glue on her head later on. I painted her face beige and her hair blue. Then her eyebrows in brown. Like I said earlier, they're a bit too thick and I wish I hadn't sculpted them on. I colored her eyelids with a brownish pastel and shaded the bridge of her nose with what was left on the brush. I'll add a bit of red on her lips, then some blush on her nose and cheeks to make her look a bit less pasty looking, and blush her ears as well. Then I use a watercolor pencil to draw her eyes. These pencils are really nice to add details with because you can use water to erase your mistakes. I'll draw her pupils in black and add a dot of white paint in each eye. Now that Coraline's head is all painted, let's glue her hair. I'm using sewing thread that I had in my sewing stash. I think the darker blue matches her hair more, but I'm afraid of running out, so I'll use both. I wrap the threads around a plastic card. I ran out of the darker blue pretty fast, so I'm glad I decided to use both colors. Then cut the threads on both ends. I'll start gluing the hair on the back of the head first, then slowly make my way to the front. I use regular white glue for this because it dries transparent. I started by gluing the hair in big chunks, but quickly realized that it made it look messy and not all the strands were sticking to the head. So I switched to gluing maybe 4 to 6 strands at a time. It did take me like 4 hours to cover the entire head, but the result is a lot neater that way, and honestly, it was super relaxing to do. I really enjoyed it. I covered the back of her head in strings and let that dry. Oh no, she kinda has a mullet now. You can't see it on camera, but I had drawn lines to create multiple sections on the top of her head to make sure that I glued the hair in the right direction. Again, adding a bit of glue and filling each section one at a time. So, I have a coworker whose favorite movie is Coraline. I only watched it twice, and I gotta say this movie freaks me out. I love the animation and the visuals, but the story, oh my god, the story is really creepy, especially towards the end. Like, if my parents were kidnapped by some creepy spider lady, sorry mom and dad, but I'm not coming to get you. You're on your own. I'm an orphan now. Yeah, so all that to say, Coraline is a brave girl, and I'm probably not gonna watch the movie again. Anyways, I covered most of the head except the front. I'll let the glue dry first and take a little break before doing the next section. Again, I made sure to glue the hair in the right direction since her hair pulls back a bit. And if you're enjoying the video so far, maybe now would be a good time to give this video a like or consider subscribing. Anyways, once the head was covered, I let the glue dry completely. At this point, I realized I forgot to add freckles to her face, so I drew those on with a pencil. You can't really see them much on camera though, but they're there. Now that the glue is dry, let's give her a haircut. I was afraid to cut her hair too short, so I cut only a little at a time until I reached the desired length. I hate to say this, but Coraline kinda has the I want to talk to the manager haircut, which is like a bob, but shorter in the back and longer in the front. Now that I said it out loud, I can't unsee it. I'm sorry. When I was happy with the haircut, I glued her tiny firefly hairpin that I sculpted in polymer clay. And that's it for the head. Let's make her clothes now. I'll start with her yellow raincoat. I made a pattern and traced it with a friction pen, which is a pretty cool pen because if I go over it with the iron, the ink will disappear. But make sure to test it on your fabric beforehand. Anyways, I Tetrised all the pattern pieces on the yellow fabric. I had to be super mindful of the placement because this fabric is all I have and I can't cut new pieces if I screw up. But I managed to fit all my pattern pieces on there and cut them out. To assemble the pieces, I'll just use Uhu glue instead of sewing. The glue made the seams super stiff, so the coat holds its shape nicely, so I'm gonna pretend I did that on purpose and not out of laziness. I'll start by gluing all the hems to make sure they're even. Then I'll glue the sleeves to the front piece and glue the back piece to the sleeves. But you can't see what I'm doing because I'm completely out of frame. So sorry about that, but all assembled it looks like this. Then I'll glue the side seams together on both sides. And that gives us a pretty stiff coat, but like I said, it holds its shape nicely. Now I'll add a front flap where the zipper would go if this was a functioning coat. But it's not, so I'll just glue it on. Next, I glued the front seam of the hood on both pieces, glued both pieces together, let that dry a bit, then cut the little slits to allow the fabric to bend more when I flip it over. Now I'll glue the hood inside the neck hole. I added two little eyelets that I made out of clay with a tiny drawstring that is made from embroidery floss that I tied a couple of knots in. And that's it for the coat. Off camera, I made the leggings out of an old ribbed tank top. I painted the red stripes on with a Posca pen. The skirt is just a tube made from red fabric. I'll put her leggings on. Then the skirt. I tied a string tight around her waist to make sure it stays in place. Then I put her coat on. I'll screw on her boots. Same thing for her hands, but you can't really see what I'm doing. I'll pressure fit the head on the neck, give her a little stick to hold, and that's it. Let's see the final shots. So what do you think? I actually started this project in November, but I had to set it aside to work on commissions. So it was nice to complete it after it sat on my table for 2 months. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.